Ladies and gentlemen, good morning and good afternoon, depending on where you are joining us from. This is Dr. Sajid here from SDPI. On behalf of SDPI and my co-organizers, Ms. Rabia Razak from ILO and Mr. Umar Ayaz from SDPI, I welcome you all to the session setting Pakistan's agenda for the universal social protection. Let me quickly run down through some housekeeping before I hand over the session to today's moderator of the session. May I please request our speakers to keep their microphones off when they are not speaking to ensure good audio quality for everyone. Speakers are also requested to switch on their cameras, especially when they are speaking, if their network allows to do that without any disruptions. The seminar will be recorded and the video will be posted online. You are welcome to revisit the discussion later and feel free to share it with your network. We are also inviting questions from our audience and colleagues at the end or as the session goes. Please feel free to write them in the chat box or on the questioner and answer box on the right side. Please have the chat box open in the windows as well. You can also indicate that you want to speak by clicking the raise hand tab on the right side of the chat window. The session will also be telecasted live on SDPI's Facebook page. For those watching us on the Facebook live, please write your questions in the chat there. They will be conveyed to the speakers throughout team. Today's session is moderated by Dr. Abid Suleri. Dr. Abid is the Executive Director of Sustainable Development Policy Institute. He is the member of different various policy-making forums. He is also a member of Prime Minister's Economic Advisory Council. He has been a member of the different international policy-making forums as well. Dr. Suleri has represented Pakistan in various official delegations, including UN Sustainable Development Summit, UNFCCC Conference of Parties, COPs, and WTO ministerial conferences. Over to you, Dr. Suleri, for proceeding on the sessions. Thank you.
Thank you, Sajid, and good morning, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, honorable panelists. I welcome you to this second session of SDPI's first virtual 23rd Sustainable Development Conference. Of course, learning to live in the new normal, we experimented with this virtual Sustainable Development Conference, and I'm so happy to see that we have got 54 participants if one looks at it. And as Sajid mentioned, that this conference is also being live streamed on at least 3 platforms, on our web TV, on our Facebook pages. And we hope that as we proceed further, we'll get more participants to join, and we would make it a lively and interactive discussion. Now, we are talking of Pakistan's agenda for universal social protection. And this session is more important because we would also be having Dr. Sania Nishtar in our formal opening plenary, which starts at 3 p.m. This afternoon. The launch would be made by the virtual launch by the President of Pakistan, and we will also have Dr. Sania Nishtar in that panel. And what I'm planning to do here, that I'm trying to get the crux of this panel, the highlights of this panel, and present it to Dr. Sania Nishtar, who is now looking after Ehsaas program and Benazir income support program, so that she can actually address some of the points that would be highlighted by the panel here. For this panel, we would be joined by Dr. Fehmida Mirza as well. Dr. Fehmida Mirza is the Federal Minister for Inter-Provincial Coordination. And the reason we requested her to join this panel is that some of the issues that would be discussed in the panel, they actually get implemented by confederating units. So of course, while we need to have a strong policy framework at a federal level, we also need to take confederating units on board, and that's where Dr. Fehmida Mirza and her ministry, it becomes more important. Now, when we were talking of setting Pakistan's agenda for universal social protection, there were two major considerations behind it. One was gap in coverage, adequacy, and comprehensiveness of provision of social protection that we have been providing pre-COVID, as well as that we provided after the COVID hit Pakistan. And second is gap in delivery and implementation. So first is about coverage and whether whatever is being covered is adequate. And second, the delivery mechanisms, the implementation, and the capacity challenge, whether we are prepared enough to take this forward. And within this broader context, we'll be talking of universal social protection. Now, the format would be that I have some questions for the speakers. These are just guiding questions. Please feel free if you would like to add anything else in it. The only constraint is that you will have 5 minutes to respond in each round. So we will have around 2 rounds of questions, and then we will come to our two speakers, guest of honors, and the chair. I'm happy to see that Ms. Ingrid Christensen, she has joined us. She is the country director of ILO. She is chairing the session. And Dr. Fehmida Mirza, she'll also be summing up the discussion. Now, let me briefly introduce my panelists, and I'll keep on introducing them as I go to them. First, I'm planning to go to Japan, where Ms. Mariko Ouchi, she has joined us. She's working as a senior technical specialist on social protection under ILO. She has been with the ILO since 2008, and previously she was working as a social protection in Moscow, Russian Federation. And Ms. Ouchi, the question that I wanted to ask you, of course, Pakistan is always willing to learn from peer countries. We keep on talking of North-South learning experience and North-South capacity building, but also South-South capacity building is equally important. And I wanted to get your opinion that how do you see current social protection system in Pakistan vis-a-vis other peer countries in the region, how sustainable it is in the present form, and what are the areas that needs to be improved to have an effective and impactful social protection system in the country. Over to you, Dr. Ouchi. Please unmute your mic.
You hear me?
Yes.
I guess that Ingrid is going to maybe better that she starts, you know, like some of the opening remark, and then I will continue further because, you know, like she's from ILO, so then I'm going to continue, you know, some of the ILO issues, and then go into the country context with some peer reviews, and then some of the points which Doctor has been already mentioned. So. If it's okay for the chair, for the moderator, then I'd like to give a floor first to Ingrid and then continue with my presentation.
Sure.
Is it okay?
Over to you, Dr. Christensen.
Honorable Minister, Excellencies, Mr. Moderator, distinguished panelists and participants, ladies and gentlemen. I would say on behalf of the ILO, we would also, as co-organizer of this session here, like to extend a warm welcome to the session on setting Pakistan's agenda for a universal social protection. And this forms part of the 23rd Sustainable Development Conference in Pakistan. And in this context, I want to congratulate the SDPI for organizing this. And I believe you have been doing so for many years, bringing a lot of key issues out. The overall aim of this dedicated session is to advocate for and promote universal social protection in Pakistan as maybe right now a response to the COVID-19 pandemic. But from our perspective, it's also equally important, maybe even more, as long as a long-term policy agenda. Social protection is not only something to bring out when there is a crisis. It should be there all the time, and this will also help build the resilience so that once a crisis or shock hits, people have better possibilities to withstand it. The discussion here today will therefore also cover some of the objectives through what are the key initiatives actually here in Pakistan, and focusing on the gaps that we see in coverage, reasons and strategies to address these gaps, and also guide the further discussion on the opportunities for universal social protection in Pakistan. I'm very happy that also Mariko is with us to also share regional and international good practices. Both globally, but also in Pakistan, the overall importance of social protection for sustainable and equitable development of a society is widely recognized. It is a key element for effective poverty alleviation as part of an active labor market policy, because it cannot replace the active labor market policy, but it's complement it very well. Social protection, we think, can contribute to economic growth, promote human development, and protect people against losses due to crises or shocks, as well as finally contribute to the political stability and social peace. Oops. Access to social protection is therefore also recognized as a basic human right, and more recently it was specifically included among the SDG targets, namely target 1.3, implement nationally appropriate social protection systems and measures for all, including floors, and by 2030, that means 10 years ahead, achieve substantial coverage of the poor and the vulnerable. It also gels very well with the agenda, or you can say the principle underpinning the SDG, namely leave no one behind. Social protection has, as I said, global importance. Large gaps, unfortunately, are seen in people's access to social protection. According to the ILO's World Social Protection Report 2017 and 19, only 29% of the world's population has adequate social security coverage, and more than half of the population lack coverage at all. They have no coverage. Coverage gaps are typically associated with a significant underinvestment in social protection, increasing informality, and a lack of good governance. The importance of social protection and social security is also underpinned by international labor standards, including the social security minimum standards from 1952, more than 60 years old, and the newer recommendation on social protection floors from 2012. These provide guidance to countries and constituents, irrespective of whether ratified or not, for the convention. For those that have ratified Convention 102, Pakistan hasn't yet. For those that have ratified, it is of course binding to implement the principles enshrined in the convention. Social protection in Pakistan is also identified as a priority in the United Nations Sustainable Development Framework 2018 to 2022, where it's a dedicated outcome on social protection. And that looks at both the statutory, but also those that are coming up as schemes, etc., to assist the poor and to assist people in need whenever through a lifetime cycle. So this is we're happy to see that. But also in the Decent Work Country Program 2016-2022 is actually identified as one of the 4 priority areas. But Pakistan, it's not a new thing in Pakistan. I want to recognize the flagship program that was launched last year, namely the ESAS program. This addresses social protection in its core, but it also goes beyond and look at the you can say supplementary areas, the complementary areas, namely for instance, the labor protection, etc. And the many initiatives that have followed in the provinces are indeed worth mentioning. But Pakistan have actually had maybe more known as social security for a long time, for decades, in relation to the labor market. We all know about the employees' social security institutions and acts and schemes, the workers' welfare funds, the employees' old age benefits, etc. These have been in place for years, but they are not reaching out to the majority of the Pakistani labor force. Universal social protection means that everybody is adequately protected against the full range of risks throughout the life course. However, this does not require that everybody receives a benefit at every point in time. Universal social protection encompasses 3 aspects: universal coverage in terms of persons protected, comprehensive protection in terms of risks covered, and also adequacy of the protection provided. And that's one of the things that in our work, we have seen that the coverage is not great in Pakistan yet, but it is improving. And we also know that there are issues with the adequacy. It's not a one-fit-all solution. Pakistan needs to have its own system, schemes in place to most efficiently and effective reach to the people in need. This session looks at where we are in Pakistan with a number of good examples, also globally, of course, and what can be done to enhance social protection in Pakistan. What are the particular expectations to this session? From our perspective, hopefully the deliberation will give us a way forward with respect to more tangible steps, making access to social protection more universal to the people who are in Pakistan. We expect to learn from other country examples, the strategy they used to expand coverage and steps they took to move towards a systems approach. We should be able to identify 2 or 3 key policy areas where the ILO may leverage its, and other partners may leverage its technical assistance through the One UN platform. We will be able to identify 1 or 2 common areas of interest where partnerships can be fostered. ILO and the World Bank, for instance, are partners on the Universal Social Protection 2030 global campaign, and invite other development partners and the government of Pakistan and the social partners to join hands. We should also be able to identify the fundamental reasons for inadequacy of current social protection programs and suggest reform. And with this, I would like to also give it to the more technical content of this and to leave it back to the moderators. I know there's a lot of questions to be answered. So thanks very much for giving also us the floor.
Thank you, Ms. Christensen, for setting the scene, and of course for making very valuable contributions. And ladies and gentlemen, as I introduced you, that Ms. Christensen, she is the country director of ILO in Pakistan. Before assuming responsibilities in Pakistan, she was based in regional office in Bangkok, again looking after social protection and occupational and health issues at ILO. Now, as per program, I'll go back to my speakers, and if I can request Ms. Ouchi, based on the remarks and comments by Ms. Christensen, if you would like to get back to the questions that I posed to you earlier before we gave the floor to Ms. Christensen. You have 5 minutes.
Okay, I have 5 minutes, so please let me know if, you know, like, I don't want to go beyond the 5 minutes, so please just give me an alarm. So I have a presentation and then I'd like to share the screen. So let me try first. Just a moment. Host disabled participant screen. Do you see my screen?
Not sure if the IT team from SDPI, if you can allow Ms. Ouchi to share her screen. Try it now.
You see my presentation?
Yes, we can see it now.
Okay. Okay. It's easier for me to do a presentation with the PowerPoints, you know, so let me start with PowerPoint's presentation. Just a moment. I have to off, excuse me. I'm not going to repeat the same thing again, you know, like of what has been already mentioned by Ingrid, you know, like important point that what exactly is a universal social protection is, and then why it's necessary in the world, you know, like not only for Pakistan, but all countries in the world. Social protection, universal social protection is a basic human right, which is a very important point. And then also investment with high, investment with high returns in economic and social development. And also globally, that only 45% of the world population have access to any form of social protection. It means that it can be one branch or one social protection scheme, social security scheme access, you know, like can be guaranteed, but still only 45% of population has this access. And then only 29% of population are covered by comprehensive social security system. So, you know, like not only by one scheme of, for example, maternity or unemployment or the pension, but or the health, but you know, like some multiple social security systems to be covered. Only bit less than 30% of world population are covered by comprehensive social security system. And as again, also Ingrid mentioned that we have only 10 years remaining to achieve the UN 2030 agenda for SDG, which includes a target 1.3 corresponding to the universal social protection. Since we are ILO, and ILO is organization, UN organization, specialized UN organization with a mandate of setting and promoting the minimum standards on labor issues, including social protection issues, and therefore that I need to touch upon, you know, this international labor standards issues still. I'm not going into too much details because I'd like to touch upon some other points though. There are 16 up-to-date social security standards, ILO standards there. And then out of all, the two important or flagship standards are concerning the social protection or social security, which is first one is a Convention 102, which was adopted in 1952. So almost like more than 50 years ago, you know, like it was adopted. And also Recommendation 202, which is a social protection flow recommendation. And then, you know, difference of the approach is that the Convention 102 covers 9 branches of Social Security. So it's divided by the branches, whereas that Recommendation 202 covers approaches with the 4 guarantees in during the life cycle plus health. So health, children, working age, and old age. So there is this diagram saying that universal social protection is much more relevant to recommendation 202, whereas that convention 102 is also very important to improve the social protection or social security system in the country. So these two standards are not substitutionary, but they are complementary. Let me touch upon the social protection coverage or in the world. And then this is the global, this is the data actually taken from the ILO social protection dashboard. Just a moment, dashboard, and most updated information available. And then as you see that in the South Asian region, the social protection coverage is rather limited, I would say. And still, as you see that pink, you know, like Pakistan as shown as less than 20%, or, you know, like some other countries between 20 to 40%. This is the coverage against the total population. But it's very important to mention that particularly in case of Pakistan and India in the region, social protection system is very much decentralized, and in case of Pakistan, that each province has its own social protection system. And in this respect, that not fully, I would say that this all data related at the provincial level has not been not fully reflected. So I would assume that the social protection coverage in Pakistan would be higher than what is shown in the data, but this issue is actually related to the data management system, lack of this effective data management system, which I'm going to touch upon at the conclusion. Then I'm going into the details by branches in terms of the coverage. Just a moment. Am I supposed to check the chat? Okay, just a moment. I'm going to touch upon the coverages by branches, and then as you see in the region, as I mentioned again, that in case of Pakistan and India, the estimates are based on the federal government data. So provincial data are not fully reflected. Provincial, or in case of India, state level data are not fully reflected. And then there is a there is a problem with the data outreach, you know, from the international agency point of view, which is one of the point needs to be improved in the country. As you see that in the region that or Pakistan per se, still the coverage for children, maternity, unemployment, etc., are still limited. So if we see from the financial side, social protection expenditure at glance, so the first top data is by the data for the world, and then by region. So, you know, like, and then it was divided into healthcare and then social protection.
Dr. Ouchi, if we can start coming towards conclusion of this round so that I can come to the other. So if I will request you, if you can give me some summary of the peer practices. Yeah.
Okay,
sorry
so well, then I'm going to the next. I'm sorry, you know, like I cannot check the chat, you know, like frequently because I'm sharing my slide. So, you know, like some of the concluding remarks I would like to make. Well, it's not just a peer, but, you know, like it's more of the general effective coverage and sustainability, which is linked to the challenges ahead. And first point is a limited social protection coverage and public spending on social protection. Which is actually linked to the fiscal space issues. There are fiscal space exists, particularly for the in terms of the federal budget. So there are space to expand social protection coverage in case of Pakistan, I would say. And the second point is that the extension of coverage and benefit level is a priority, particularly in the context of COVID response. Third point, COVID-19 actually presented that targeted assistance is limited due to informality and lack of data, including lack of data coordination and information management system between federal provinces. So, you know, like still it has a program provided a household cash transfer assistance, which is very much valued and appreciated. But still, if this assistance needs to be a little bit more targeted to the certain segment of people or etc., then more sophisticated data and then information management system will be required. And then in this respect, that there are some other countries which are improving this information management system at this moment. Like, for example, we are trying to improve this system in Nepal, and then a similar kind of intervention can be envisaged or can be expected in case of Pakistan. Areas to be improved. As you see that, you know, like before going into the details, it's quite important to have some of the comprehensive social protection review, and then scheme-based review would be required. Why? Because supporting certain particular target group or particular scheme without seeing what kind of social protection support is available it causes inefficiency. So in this sense, that some sorts of comprehensive social protection review would be still required. I picked up health, working age, and old age in particular, according to the recommendation to life cycle model. And in case of health, which is quite relevant in the context of COVID, there is challenges in terms of the extension of coverage to informal workers and workers in the rural area. Also, the quality of healthcare in the rural area to be a challenge. Working age population actually, again, you know, informal extension of social protection to informal workers, including so-called missing middle. So so-called middle class people, but still they are not covered properly by social protection system. So how to solve this missing middle will be a challenge. And also how to extend the social protection to internal migrant workers through social security coordination provinces will be a challenge. And old age, I just somebody is talking. Old
if
age.
I can request, I think someone's mic is on. Please mute your mics.
The old age, I just touch upon old age issues, though population growth is still positive in Pakistan, but still it requires long-term perspective. And then while the country is in the trend of economic growth, it's necessary to prepare with a long-term view. And then because sooner or later that Pakistan will also go into the elderly society, in this respect, that the specific schemes, specific intervention for the with a long-term projection on old age benefit would be necessary. So I am going to stop my presentation.
Thank you, Ms. Ouchi. I know it was slightly longish, but I think it was
I'm
important
sorry.
to get this perspective, ILO's perspective, both from Mr. Christensen as well as from you, so that the rest of the speakers who are following you, they could get an idea of the best practices, the peer, what is happening in peer economies and peer countries. Let me also take this opportunity to welcome Dr. Fehmida Mirza. She has joined us. Thank you, Dr. Saba, the Federal Minister for Inter-Provincial Coordination. We'll come to you towards the end of this discussion. I'll now go to Dr. Faisal Rifaq. Dr. Faisal Rifaq is the CEO of Sehat Sahulat program, which is the Prime Minister's health insurance scheme. And the particular question to you, Dr. Rifaq Saab, you have listened to distinguished speakers from ILO. Just wanted to know, seek your opinion that, in your opinion, how timely and effective were the responses by Pakistan in the context of COVID? And if I had to ask you to give me 2 to 3 lessons that you draw based on your reading of response of social protection system during the COVID-19. Over to you, Dr. Saab. You have about 5 to 6 minutes.
Thank you very much, Dr. Abid Suleri. And I appreciate I was listening to the discussions which happened on this website.
So you have to, I think, get closer to your mic. Yeah.
All right, that'd be great. Can
Yes.
everybody hear me well?
Yeah, yeah.
All right. I'm basically heading the program of social health protection in the Ministry of National Health Services. So my discussion will be more focused toward the health aspect of the social protection. So just to give a background, the universal health coverage in Pakistan, we believe that the good health is essential to sustain economic and social development and poverty reduction efforts by any government. Access to needed healthcare services is crucial for maintaining and improving the health in a country. At the same time, people need to protect from being pushed into poverty because of the cost of the healthcare, which is escalating every day. Universal health coverage ensures that all people have access to needed healthcare services, including prevention, promotion, treatment, rehabilitation, palliative services in sufficient quality to be effective while ensuring that the use of these services does not expose the user of any financial hardship. Universal health coverage has therefore become a major goal for the health reform in Pakistan and a priority objective in many countries, including the Middle East and the Southeast Asian country. So Pakistan is one of those countries who are making all the efforts to provide the universal health coverage to our people. The Sehat Sahulat program is a social health protection initiative in Pakistan, which is being funded by the federal and funded and supported by the federal government, as well as the participating provincial and regional governments. Through these program, all the beneficiaries, which we have started from the below poverty, and then slowly and gradually we are moving toward the universalization to provide and provide the families, the enrolled families, for towards currently we are only focusing on the indoor healthcare services, while in the future we are slowly expanding it to provide the other related services for the program. This COVID situation was a very critical position. You know, we learned a lot of lessons while implementing the program, the Social Health Protection Initiative in Pakistan during the COVID scenario. We were able to cover a lot of things, but we felt that there are a lot more things which are to be done. As I mentioned, currently the program is for the below poverty families. So what about the people who are above poverty? This COVID situation have brought many people below not the threshold of the poverty, but near to that threshold. so that those families have not been, initially visualized in the social health protection initiative. But now, because of the COVID, we were forced to think, both in the federal government and the provincial government, that there something has to be done to the families who are not technically below the poverty line, but they do need financial protection. So, keeping in view the sustainable development goals which Pakistan has vetted, and its health related and social protection targets, the federal and the provincial governments are working to include those services which are not currently being provided by the program. For example, currently we are providing the indoor healthcare services to patients, our families, which require the indoor services for the ventilatory support, for all other support. We were providing those services. But what about the the services which are not being provided through the hospital? They are to be provided through the outpatient services and through non-admission processes. So we are working how to include what to learn from this experience and how to include those services into the benefit package of the program. So I think the COVID has given us a lot of opportunity to learn and to plan for the future and to reflect how the government of Pakistan is providing services to our families, so that no person in the country goes below the poverty line just because of catastrophic health expenditure. Achieving UNC is one of the biggest target of the nation, universal health coverage of the nation, not only in the Pakistan but also for the developing world. And I think we all have to work together to expand this initiative across Pakistan, and especially in Pakistan, which is a developing country. And this thing also is reflected in the national health vision of the Pakistan, which state that all families, regardless of the poverty, should have a financial health protection by the year 2026. So I think I, from Ministry of Federal Government platform, would also request our partners to let's join hands together and let's work toward where no family, no individual goes beyond the poverty line or cannot access the healthcare services just because he or she cannot afford those services. So with these words, I give the forum to the administration so that we can move forward. And thank you very much. Dr. Abiswai, over to you.
Hello. Dr. Suleri, can you listen us, please?
Yes, yes, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Just let me just put on, I'm just told on WhatsApp that Dr. Suleri is having some connection problems. So I'll be taking care of in until the moment Dr. Suleri joins us, please. Can you hear me, everyone? Thank you, Dr. Rifaq, for bringing some important points on aspects of the health sector in Pakistan. And it seems a good commitment and the promise that each family should have a health protection in Pakistan. We look forward this coming true and implemented. Thank you so much. With this, let me move towards Mr. Lire Ersado. He is a senior economist with the Human Development Unit of the Middle East and the North African region, the World Bank. Currently, he manages social protection, analytical, and lending activities and the policy dialogue in Egypt, Jordan, and the Yemen. Previously, Mr. Lire was with the Human Development Economics Group in the Europe and the Central Asia region, where he had led regional and programmatic poverty monitoring and statistical capacity building for South Caucasus, with so relevant activities. So Mr. Lire, the question that I would like you to reflect on, it's one of the very important question. You know, the pandemic has really highlighted the sort of the centrality of the social protection system across the world. You know, the countries with having better social protection, having a universal touch in it, were better able to respond. In this context, how do you think the current pandemic has urged the need to have a universal social protection system more than ever. Particularly if you have been having an eye on Pakistan, what have been the responses from Pakistan? And the most important question of this session comes to you. What should be the minimum agenda of universal social protection in Pakistan? And where can it start from? Over to you, sir. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I want to report to you that I'm not in Eastern Europe anymore. I'm in Pakistan, based in Islamabad. Happy to be in Pakistan and looking forward to working with all of you. I am a practice leader for human development sectors in Pakistan, education, health, and social protection and jobs. So I feel as part of the family and looking forward to the heated discussions. So I will be making some important comments, I would say, so that we will have a nice exchange and discussions and views that I hope will help in advancing universal social protection agenda for Pakistan. So I won't go too much into the importance of having USP. My fellow colleagues from ILO and also Dr. Faisal already highlighted the importance of it. So I go straight to the question you raised. I hope everybody can hear me.
Yes, we can.
Perfect. So let me start with the first question, whether COVID-19 has put the urgency in order to push for universal social protection. Yes, I would agree, yes, but as Dr. Christian noted, the importance of USP was already there. COVID only brought it into the surface and make it a more urgent issue. So yes, I agree. And in fact, the lessons we have from Pakistan underscores that. What we have learned from our experience working in Pakistan during COVID-19 is that while we have programs that covers the extreme poor, the bottom quintile, and as noted also by Christian and Ouchi, there is a relatively strong old age pension program covering the formal sector. There's a huge gap in the middle. What everybody noted is a missing middle, which is a large informal sector that suffered a lot under the COVID stress crisis. They were left out, but Pakistan took some speedy measures in order to reach out to some of those by expanding the cash transfer program from 4.6 million regular beneficiaries to almost 15 million families, more than 65 million individuals. So, but the point, the lesson there is Pakistan has some of the foundations in order to expand the program both vertically and horizontally. I think that's a lesson that we learn but this program is very temporary. It does not address this long run permanent issue of risky, poor risk management environment for the large segment of the middle class. The middle, I would not even call it middle class, just the big chunk, the huge, large share of the population that lie in the middle of the income distribution between the poorest and the very few who may be on the top echelon of income distribution. So I think that's one. The second urgency I want to highlight here is the financing of this type of programs. Given the limited resources, it's not easy to just provide coverage or transfers to everybody. So this importance of making sure that we gradually approach universal coverage. And the point I want to highlight here for everyone to say is, so there is analogy between the UHC that Dr. Faisal highlighted and what we want to do in the SP. So in healthcare, if you look at it, coverage doesn't mean you are actually getting a payout or getting actual cash transfer every moment. So it's just that the resources will be there, the protection will be there when you need it, at the time of need. So I think the question for USP, maybe a question for my ILO colleagues is, that's my understanding of what the USP should look like. Is that the country system is ready to provide needed support when it is needed, not necessarily making actual transfers or actual payout. It's just a guarantee that I will be okay if I suffer economic shocks, if I suffer the pandemics that we do now, that there is a system in place that can respond to my need immediately. If that's in there, it's just like having a guarantee, not actual payout. So I think that's important distinction that we need to make when we talk about the USP. That's one point I want to highlight. I think if you do that, the existing system is not ready in order to respond automatically to those challenges yet, but Pakistan has a good ingredients in the system. The national registry, the payment mechanism, the identification mechanism, NADRA, they just need to be more dynamic, that they listen to the beneficiaries' needs, reflect that in the system, and accept requests and information from families who need this support on regular and continuous basis, rather than as is the case now with the Caliphate program. The certification was not done over the last 10 years because it requires a major household survey. So we need to find a way to avoid that. We need to take advantage of technology in order to make that connection between beneficiaries and the system readily available. If you do that, we don't need to make a cash transfer every moment, but it's just that we have a system ready to respond quickly when we need it. So that's an important point I want to highlight, but I would like to hear what my ILO colleagues would say. The third point I would like to make is Pakistan has the human capital services challenges, also highlighted by Dr. Faisal on this. So we could have a very good social protection system, but if the supply of a good healthcare system, good education system is not there, this is not going to sort out the long-term economic growth and sustainability issues that Pakistan faces as it looks forward to its 100 year in 2047. So we want to make sure that the demand side and supply side constraints are addressed. You could actually see that with the persistent challenge of a high rate of stunting in Pakistan, with almost 38% of kids under 5 are stunted. You can also see that large share of out of school children, almost Pakistan is contributing the second highest number globally to the number of children out of school. The learning poverty rate in Pakistan is at least 75%, among the lowest, almost on par to Afghanistan, a war-torn Afghanistan. So those challenges need to be addressed. So social protection cannot stand by itself unless we have the supply and demand sides and the behavioral changes that we need are in place. I think COVID made those quite clear, that we need to work multi-sectorally. There has to be stronger coordination between the federal and provincial. There needs to be a dynamic registry that captures, listens to the families, relays the information to the decision makers, which promptly could lead to intervention in time of need. That's my third point. And just moving on to the second point that you asked me on what's the minimum agenda. For me, minimum agenda is to make sure that there is inclusivity in the system. Right now, it excludes a large share of the poor and the vulnerable. So I think that's the first point of start. Before we can have a universal system, we still have to target those who are suffering at the weight of the crisis, already suffering because of structural issues in the system. So I don't see really a conflict between targeting and universality. So that the bottom has to be supported as the resources permit, as voluntary participants increase, that system can expand and reach more. And just what we need now is to make sure that everybody that needs help is covered in time of their need. So having sort of a guaranteed minimum income that's readily available. So whoever falls through the cracks because of financial crisis or any other crisis, I think we need to have that in place. Right now, we don't have that. One of the reasons is we don't have a data system which captures the necessary information in that we need to hear from beneficiaries as well as from the different agencies and the databases. They are not talking to each other. The provincial programs, as Ouchi mentioned, are not properly reflected in the national database. So we have to have a system where we have a database communicating to each other, relaying information, and seamlessly functioning to meet the needs of the vulnerable. And the second and probably last point on your second question is, it's a question of just understanding better. This is not an isolated or a sector agenda, it's a system-wide agenda. When we have a universal coverage, there's implication for inflation, there's implication for other aggregate demand and so on. So we have to look at the financing and also the needs of the population widely. Right now, the old pension system is supported through payroll tax and other forms of financing. But I think that's not going to be a lasting solution given technology, economic integration, social changes, demographic changes, climate changes, as some of you noted. So we need a more robust system of financing these functions in order to make sure that there is no work disincentive, there is adequacy of those programs. We also need to make sure that it's affordable for the government. So we have to look at the whole system. What's the implication of USP is not clear. If you ask me, we only have very small pilots throughout the world, but we don't really have what this whole implication of that kind of system would be. So we are a long way from understanding it. But if you focus on making sure that our system is ready to respond when there is a need, I think we are okay. Our coverage is much larger than the actual transfers that you see from the program. So I think that's a key point for me in this whole discussion. In terms of opportunity for Pakistan, obviously the existing national socio-economic registry, which covers almost 85% households, is a good point to start. And there is technology and the digital infrastructure that could facilitate not only identification, but as well as helps in mobilizing resources for these programs efficiently and equitably. I think that's another opportunity for Pakistan to take advantage of when we think about universal social coverage. In terms of constraints, I think let me highlight the two, and I will stop there. One is the financing. I think obviously is a big constraint. You saw how much resource it required in order to provide temporary support during the COVID response. So it's not possible to continue that way. So we need to rethink the financing system, the tax system, and broaden it in order to reach more beneficiaries. The coordination challenge, also highlighted by other colleagues, between provincial, federal, between agencies, between line ministries, between departments, that is still very difficult for us. I'm speaking from the World Bank side. We have to juggle that quite a lot, and we need to fix that. Final point is this dynamic inclusion challenge, that the system has to be dynamic and responsive, and in order to provide households with the support they need in order to be resilient in time of shocks. Because it's not going to be just COVID, as you noted earlier. There will be other shocks. There will be other issues. COVID only made the existing vulnerabilities in the system quite obvious, and it's an opportunity for us to respond to that. Let me stop it, and thank you so much for patiently listening to me, and looking forward to any questions you may have. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Mr. Lire, bringing us such a mix of opportunities and challenges. Presentation was really between the hopes and the challenges. It's good. We will come back to you in the second round on it. What do you mean by dynamic registry and the dynamic system to respond, and where do you think Pakistan stands on this one? Let me move to our last speaker, Haris Gazdar Saab. But in this, before moving to him, I would like to just highlight one of the comment, and that is one comes in the Pakistan on the center stage whenever you call USP. That is the financial, the financing of the USP or the fiscal space argument. I think one of the key reasons for this argument taking a center stage can be a causality issue. Most probably, whenever we are talking on moving to USP, we are taking a unidirectional from current system to USP. But maybe we are ignoring the gains from the USP, that USP will be bringing economic gains, the productivity gains, and the other social inclusivity, as you mentioned. So I think if we can have a counterfactual, what will be the gains, then I think this argument may take a bit backstage, because I think USP can bring its own fiscal space. It can create its own fiscal space. And no one is better than Haris Gazdar Saab to guide on us on these issues. Haris Gazdar Saab is a director and senior researcher at the Collective for Social Science Research, an independent academic and policy research organization in Karachi. He currently serves as the coordinator on social protection to the Chief Minister of the Sindh province of Pakistan, and is leading a design and rollout of the social protection system and programs in the provinces. He is one of the most read authors and the practitioner on the social policy in Pakistan. So Haris Gazdar Saab, the particular question that I would like to you to reflect on, including on the causality of the USP to fiscal space. What do you think will be the major policy changes in existing national policies that needs to come by if we have to break this sort of the circle from current challenges of the social protection to move towards the USP? And do you find any torch bearers within Sindh or in the federal government or in any other provinces? Particularly if you can also reflect on the private sector. And the final, as I mentioned on the USP fiscal space issue, what do you think can be the major foundations of building a case for USP in Pakistan? Thank you so much. Over to you, sir.
Thank you. Can you hear me? Yeah.
Yes, we can.
Okay, so I'm sharing a presentation, which is basically just a few talking points. If you can see it, then it makes my job easier.
Yes, we can. We can.
Of course, we have a lot of torchbearers in Sindh and in Punjab and in Balochistan and in Gilgit. Everywhere there are torchbearers in Pakhtunkhwa. So this country is full of torchbearers, partly because we have such erratic power supply. Anyway. There are bare bones. I think a lot of the ground has already been covered, so let me just actually whiz through some of my points. I think that I particularly appreciate a number of conceptual as well as kind of review observations from my earlier colleagues. Of course, we have the bare bones of a universal SP system in Pakistan now, and that's all we have. It's an important achievement, but that's what the achievement is, that we have the bare bones, which means that we still have to have the entire organic structure in place. And regardless of, how we get swayed by current trends, we must be very careful in our interpretation of history. It really began with the Benazir Income Support Program more than a decade ago. So we've made an important achievement. It's a paradigm shift. And there are very specific things that happened with the establishment of the Benazir Income Support Program. We went from targeting erratically to targeting from a well-defined universe. So one of my co-panelists earlier said that when we say universal, it doesn't mean that everybody gets a transfer all the time, but the concept of a universe is critical, whether you have a targeted program or a non-targeted program. And there is a big debate, has been a big debate in social protection for decades. The point is that nobody escapes the logic and the rigor of a universe. And that was the main important achievement of a huge advance in social protection programming and social policy programming in Pakistan, that we went to targeting from a universe. And how did we achieve it? We basically did it through a methodology of a door-to-door survey. We don't have to keep repeating that, but nevertheless, that was a very rigorous method, which made sure that every single Pakistani was actually reached, and there were mechanisms for making sure that they were reached. Beyond that, of course, there were lots of questions about targeting, and there will always be. The second important shift was that we de-linked social protection from employment. Now, that was a very positive thing then, and yet it has its limitations, and I'll talk about those as well. Why was it positive? Because, as you know, We have inherited a colonial system in which there are pockets of social protection in every sector, mostly in the formal sector. People who are in formal sector jobs and government jobs, they actually enjoy a very high standard of social protection at the expense of, I think, the vast majority of the population. So the delinking of your social protection coverage from your employment status, I think, was an unheralded but an important factor in the shift away in design. The third, of course, which is a very important thing, and I want to talk a little bit more about that in the current context also, was increase in scale with respect to fiscal outlay. If you recall, when the Benazir Income Support Program came, it at a stroke increased social protection spending by 3 or 4 times at one stroke. Prior to that, the National Social Protection Strategy of 2007 had envisaged a stage-wise increase to that level over a period of 5 or 6 years. So within the period of a year, we achieved what was to be achieved in 5 or 6 years, and that too had only received cabinet endorsement. It had actually, it never became enacted, that earlier policy. The fourth important point was women as primary beneficiaries, and that was quite revolutionary as well, because until then, in all of our programs, women were only beneficiaries by residual. So if in a household there wasn't a man available, a woman could be a beneficiary. And the fifth one, which actually then became a very important operational activity, in some ways it was a very key thing in establishing the program, and Dr. Lire Ersado also mentioned that as a very important
हारिस साहब आपकी आवाज नहीं आ रही है
which is these key partnerships between databases and payment, and these were tested, and also limitations in this way of thinking. And let me just, sorry, I got disconnected. Can you hear me now? Hello?
Yeah, we can now. You are back now.
Okay, hang on. And we try the screen again. Okay. Now, so these achievements, we must also then start to acknowledge what are the points of stagnation, and where are the things that we made a start, but we actually didn't take it through, and where we're still stuck, and where we need important changes. When the program first came, there was a lot of talk of it being targeting food insecurity. And if you recall, the initial public campaigns were about Chulha Jalta Rahe, which was around the time of a commodity price rise, food price rise. The major economic crisis in 2008-2009 period, global crisis, which was hitting us in a very particular way. And the program itself was, at that time, taken to the public and got major acceptance from the political elite on the grounds that it was going to provide food security. A lot of the design features, such as women beneficiaries, were also linked to that. Now, there is a problem when that path, or don't be rigorous with that, and I think that we have fallen in that trap, that we've basically done a great deal of work on the operational side without actually looking at the substantive goal we want universal social protection or social protection to achieve. In my own humble opinion, I think that food security remains a very important priority for our country, but this is an opinion. A lot of these opinions will get tested and will get filtered through the political process. We have a democratic system, at least in name, and it's quite possible that some people will will see that health protection is the most important, or old age protection, but I don't have any problem with that. But we do need to set priorities for social protection. We can't do everything for everybody. And in a country where roughly a third of the population experiences food insecurity on a regular basis, my own view is that food insecurity has to be a clear agenda item. We also have to reestablish a clearer linkage with livelihoods and or absence of livelihoods. Okay, so now I spoke of how it was progressive to de-link social protection from employment, because for a long time, the people who were already privileged with formal sector jobs were also beneficiaries of social protection, and we de-linked that, we linked social protection to your actual condition. And I think that was very important. But we really need to re-establish that linkage now. And I'm very happy that this session is hosted by the ILO, and ILO is also, of course, an organization that works on active labor markets, other forms of livelihood. And the key thing is not that we want to go back to a situation of linkage. I'm sorry, I keep cutting out, but okay. Now, so the importance of that link, I think, is that, and this is something that we learned through the COVID experience as well, when we suddenly found that we actually didn't know enough about people who were facing all kinds of vulnerabilities in a very kind of sudden situation. So if we don't have that link, at least in terms of data, in terms of our understanding of how people get their livelihoods, we will never be able to do the third thing, which I think is very important, which is to establish a dynamic social registry with a rights-based approach and self-targeting. Okay, these three things are really critically important. We do now have the basic infrastructure to achieve some of these, but a dynamic social registry, as I'm very happy to hear that Lire also talked about that. A dynamic social registry is basically a window between citizens and people and the government, where people can register their requirements and the government fulfills them. And really at the core of it is rights, that people have a right to social protection. And therefore a dynamic social registry allows you to do that. In the first instance, when we did the Benazir Income Support Program, if you recall, it was a poverty scorecard census, door to door, and once you qualified, basically you got it. So you never actually had to apply for that benefit, and you basically stay on it until you get recertified. But you actually, there is no way of getting on it or off it given your own immediate circumstances. And I think that's a very big gap. And if you want a sustainable and effective system, we need a dynamic social registry, which has to be built on a rights-based approach. Self-targeting is a very critical thing in all modern social protection systems. There is no reason why we can't have it. Of course, it comes with mechanisms for verification and audit. And I can go into the details a little bit more based on our experience of what we're trying to design in Sindh, what we've learned from Pakistan's experience and elsewhere. Now, federal and provincial government's roles and mandates, and I think here what I will find for you is also some fiscal space. In our current system, one very critically important reason why a UCT has to be done by federal government, a very key important reason, is that federal government actually has the wallet. It has the purse, right? And part of it is basically our constitutional system, where a lot of the higher yielding heads of taxation are within the resource mandate of the federal government. Now, unfortunately, over the decades, the federal government has performed very badly in this. The federal government agencies have not done well. And quite interestingly, provincial government agencies in all of the provinces, particularly in Sindh and Punjab, have done reasonably well. So the share of taxation from federal government sources has actually declined by a good 10 percentage points in the last 10 years. Quite largely due to the reforms of the NFC, 7th NFC and the 18th Amendment. So there's actually while there's a very strong rationale for the federal government to take a lead in national redistributive transfers, and I think they should always be involved, We also need to do more at other levels of government, but basically it will have to be linked to taxation and spending reforms, fiscal reforms in a really deep sense. And I will say a little bit more about that. Moreover, the federal government also controls major official databases, such as NADRA, which have become indispensable for good reasons and bad. So there are very important advantages of databases like NADRA, and there are also important disadvantages that we have to basically counter. But these have become indispensable in our system for the administration of social protection intervention. Government knows now that you cannot transfer a single rupee to anybody outside of the banking system and without verification by NADRA. And in some ways, that's a good thing. In some ways, that's a big problem, because a lot of people are not in NADRA anymore, and never have been. And there are lots of important transaction costs for people who are poor and socially vulnerable and marginalized in getting sufficient documentation to get their NADRA things in order. But nevertheless, that's a federal government mandate, and that therefore federal government will have to be involved. But the role of provincial and local governments is also critically important. And I would want to stress that local governments in our constitutional scheme of things are part of the provincial government. So provincial governments and local governments, they have to work together, and they're part of the same team. And the next generation of social protection programming beyond the UCT really involves a lot of sectors. Actually, every single sector that they involve are sectors where the line presence, the line management, the actual field presence is with the provincial government, either by itself or in partnership with private sector providers, as we have, for example, in Sindh with our BHUs and so on, or through local government. So all of these three things are actually basically pegged to the provincial level of government. Even if you look at disaster management at the local level, the DDMAs and the PDMAs, they're all part of the provincial mandate. So whether it is, labor, agricultural workers, for example, in Sindh, we've just had a law recognizing women agricultural workers. And of course, it has immediate consequences for social protection. Health, disaster management, differently abled people, education, all of these are mandates of provincial governments. And provincial governments are rapidly developing field level presence in all of these areas. Okay, so there's a very important shift beyond the 18th Amendment, where provincial governments are developing capacity and they have a field presence in these areas. So provinces need to build strong and dynamic social registries that would complement the work of the National Socioeconomic Registry. Our constitutional system requires a dynamic social registry, which has close operational links with line departments, and that can only be done by the provinces. The federal government cannot have the resources. It doesn't have the mandate to have that level of a community level presence in the field. And we can see that in terms of the problems we're facing now with the BISP, or no matter what you want to call it. A lot of the operational problems, its design required a recertification in 48 months. It's been more than a decade now, and we still have no word as to where the recertification exercise is. A lot of it is due to the lack of organizational presence of the federal government and its organizations at the local level. Now, who are going to be the stakeholders? Where will the resources come from? Not just in terms of money, but in terms of political resources. And I think that we're really looking at the type of political reforms on the scale of, or perhaps even bigger than the 18th Amendment, if we are going to look at universal social protection. Why do I say that? Because of two very important considerations that are staring us in the face. If we want universal social protection, or if we even want a well-functioning social protection, its proper maintenance and its accountability, even to the scale that we began to achieve about 10 years ago, then I think that it has to be continuous, and it has to be continuously expanding. And we need to recognize the right to social protection, and that will automatically release a lot of mandates. It will automatically ensure protection of fiscal allocations. Somebody was mentioning the situation in India, and a number of important programs in India, for example, their food security program under the ration system. Of course, I'm not saying we should do that. And their National Rural Employment Guarantee Act. Both of them have constitutional and legal mandated guarantees. We have that to an extent with the BISP through an act of parliament. We need more. But the second very critical issue, and this is something that economists worry about all of the time, is that these things become sustainable only if they're linked to broader reforms, broader fiscal reforms, both in taxation and subsidies. Now, I told you a little bit about the rationale, some of the rationales for the BISP when it first came. And one of, yes, sorry.
Just that our session will be automatically closed by 1:10 by design. Okay. So if you can please summarize, we have just honorable minister. Thank you.
One of the important selling points for the BISP then, and one of the important selling points for the big increase in scale, was that we were at that time spending a large amount of money on untargeted subsidies. So when we went to negotiate then with the IMF and said, look, we actually have a plan, we have a homegrown plan to move toward a system of targeted subsidies, everyone in the world actually supported us. We were not able to achieve that. Our untargeted subsidies continued to balloon. They're continuing to balloon now. Our taxation reforms have stalled. And I think that the most responsible thing we can do is to link our fiscal reforms with our social protection reforms. So basically, and we find very strong political constituencies for that. So let me end there. And thank you again very much for listening to me through all of these technical glitches. Thank you.
Thank you. We have so many questions coming there. But unfortunately, we will not be able to take much of them. But what we do promise that we will be coming back on these questions, maybe in the written, and we will be sharing. Unfortunately, some of our presentations of the speakers were beyond the 5 minutes that we have initially agreed and we committed. This really leaves us very difficult to come to the second round. So with this, let me go to our Honorable Federal Minister, Dr. Fehmida Mirza Sahiba. So before I hand over the mic to her, 4 major points are emerging from today's presentation, the discussion that we are having. Very encouragingly, that USP is the right. It's a fundamental right to have a universal social protection. Another point that was very encouraging, that Pakistan has the basic ingredients of the recipe and must move to USP gradually. One of the key critical element that is emerging from today's discussion is that dynamic social registry will be very critical to have this transition from current social protection system to USP. And the finally point, the interesting point that is made by that the federal government should take the lead mainly because it has the wallet. And then of course, this can be linked with the NFC. And fourth point, that role of the provincial government will be very critical in moving this one. So with this, all these points in mind, let me now request Honorable Federal Minister for his concluding remarks. And if we have time, we will come. Thank you.
Thank you. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yeah, it's a pleasure for me to join this session, and I want to congratulate SDPI for holding this timely conference. I would also like to thank ILO for supporting and organizing this discussion, which is imperative. Social protection has become a matter of importance due to this pandemic. I want to highlight that social protection must be an indispensable part of economic policy making. And the impact of policies depends on the mechanism for delivering support, especially the coordination between the federal government and the provincial governments. The able speakers of the panel have very excellently urged the need and proposed the agenda of universal protection in Pakistan. I agree that Pakistan must take steps to ensure that social protection system by 2030, which fully covers removing financial barriers and ensuring provision of quality health care, B, enhancing income and food security, reaching out to workers in the informal economy, protecting and providing jobs, and delivering social protection by promoting uniformity and other interventions. Mr. Ingrid, the representative of ILO, has made some very, very relevant points here. And I do agree with him that in Pakistan, we do have a national data system in place. But what he emphasized was to have a proper structure and systems in place, so that whenever we confront any challenge or whenever there is shocks, so we are able to right away address it. And in this regard, Ministry of IPC from the Forum of Inter-Provincial Coordination Committee, which is IPCC, and CCI can develop a mechanism to strengthen and have uniformity between different social development programs of the provinces and to promote consensus on matters such as food security, employment, labor protection, and healthcare. Furthermore, they can also align and aim to meeting SDG targets, advocate for universal protection, social protection, and developing partnerships between public and private sectors. Federal government has launched Ehsaas program, and like we heard from Mr. Haris also, and the Benazir Income Support Program in the province. So we see that there are several programs being run in different provinces and even at the federal level. But what we see, and like very rightly again, the Ingrid mentioned about it, was it is all the provincial programs are not reflected on the national data. So for which I think the IPC can play a very, very important role, and bringing for uniformity amongst the provinces, because different provinces running different social programs. For that, I think it is very important that this ministry can play a role under IPCC. And whenever there is consensus or to develop consensus, we can take it to the CCI. I would also like to urge SDPI to build an evidence-based business case for USP and a poverty alleviation mechanism at the federal and provincial level in collaboration with ILO that CCI can take forward. I reiterate that universal social protection is a human right. Article 37 and 38 mandates the state to promote social justice and eradicate social evils by enabling people of different areas through education, training, agriculture, and industrial development. Also promoting social and economic well-being. This can only be achieved if provinces establish their respective finance commission. Mr. Haris mentioned about the local government, and he also mentioned about NFC. What I see that under the NFC, whatever resources, yes, we do need to expend our tax net, but whatever resources are collected at the federal level, out of which the 60% goes to the provinces. And so talking about the wallet and the money part, yes, we do need to increase the tax net, but whatever the provinces, the 60% share, if it goes to the provinces and it is not evenly distributed, or the backward areas are not accommodated, then the results of any social protection we will not be able to achieve those targets. So I think under Provincial Finance Commission, which is very, very important, and also empowering our local government is, I think, the key to address the poverty issue. So through Provincial Finance Commission, you can reach far-flung and less developed areas. So I think these are the things, and especially to have proper structure in place, for which I look forward to work through through SDPI and ILO, we can work on the legislative part also, because a minimum common agenda, I think from today's discussion where IPCC and CCI can help and support is SDPI and ILO is promoting USP in Pakistan and also formulate legislation for the welfare of labor. So I once again congratulate, and I'm ready to take any questions. If you think we need to respond, I'm ready to question, but I think we need to have more such sessions, because we need to develop a tool or a system at the IPC level under cooperative federalism, where we can bring uniformity and can have proper cooperation and coordination between the federal government and the provinces. The national health program of the the federal level, wherever the provinces they are ready to support this federal program, there this health insurance policy is being implemented. But where the provinces are not on board, there I see that there is a lot of issue, and especially the area, the far-flung areas where it is needed the most are deprived. So we can develop a system, and we need to strengthen IPCC and CCI to address such issues. And I congratulate you, Dr. Abid Suleri, and your team and ILO for organizing such an important session. Also, I appreciate our very able experts for their insightful discussion. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Madam Minister, for very encouraging remarks and for your support towards this agenda of universal social protection. And as you rightly mentioned, that the role of Ministry of Inter-Provincial Coordination is extremely important for this to happen. And for my international speakers, let me also introduce Dr. Fehmida Mirza is the former Speaker of our National Assembly and one of the experts of Constitution of Pakistan. And of course, her support is extremely important for pushing any constitutional or legislative improvement for the agenda of social protection in the country. Thank you again, Dr. Mirza, for joining us. So ladies and gentlemen, we had an intensive discussion about universal social protection. I'm thankful to Ms. Christensen of ILO for setting the scene. Then Ms. Ouchi, she reminded us of some of the global and regional best practices of social protection. Dr. Faisal Rifaq, he shed light on this health insurance and health protection mechanism of Prime Minister. Then we had Mr. Ersado, who gave World Bank's perspective of social protection, and I was delighted by his knowledge of Pakistani systems and WISP and Ayaz program. And then, of course, Mr. Haris Gazdar and Mr. Umar Ayaz, who are the domestic authorities in Pakistan on social protection. So we tried to cover bits and pieces of this bigger picture, bits and pieces of this jigsaw puzzle, so that we can put them together and converge it into a broader picture. There would be 2 more sessions on social protection in this SDC in the next 4 days. One is plenary with Dr. Sania Nishtar, and second is again a discussion on universal social protection agenda. We have received your feedback, your questions on chat box, which I have advised Sajid to send to the respective speakers. We promise that we'll be coming back to you with the answers, and of course we'll also be utilizing the next 2 panels for posing those questions to those speakers as well. But for now, I would request Ms. Christensen for a formal votes of thanks. Over to you, Ms. Christensen.
Thanks very much, Dr. Suleri, for these concluding words on it. It has indeed been a very rich discussion where we have covered a wide ground of areas in terms of what is the scenario, also both at the global level, regional level, and Pakistani level, and have heard, I think, also very encouraging words about that they are really something to build on here. It is a need, but we need to get it right and get it together. I would in particularly, first and foremost, like to thank the Honorable Minister, Mrs. Mirza, for her remarks and comments very wisely. And I as you've set the scene also that it's a right, it is there in the Constitution, etc. But also you talked about the importance of coordination. I think that's something that we all share, the coordination between the provinces and the federal level. If that's not in place, then the system is likely not to work as well as it could. And yes, I think you also mentioned, but I also picked up that Mr. Lire Ersado was mentioning as the whole issue of financing, etc. This is something one needs to look at. I have seen all the chat box, and so that seems we have had some very, very enthusiastic and energetic panelists. So thanks very much to everybody who joined this seminar. I would also like to thank the speakers that brought, you can say, technical content to the discussion, brought in different perspectives. I will not summarize that because I know we have only 2 minutes left. And lastly, I would like to also thank very much the SDPI for their collaboration on organizing this year. It is indeed a time where social protection is really, the need of social protection is coming to the forefront during this pandemic. So it's very, very great that you also took this opportunity, and I understand it's not the only session and slot that where social protection will be discussed. I obviously hope also from an ILO perspective that it is being discussed also in the context of complementing, you can say, the active labor market, because social protection in itself is of course one element, but if people can also have access to jobs and can earn an income, that can be this is another important way to work out of the crisis or work out of the poverty. Not always social protection is needed for certain. We all get old and there will be need for social protection in these instances, but that they are indeed coupled with also active labor market policies. So with this, I think we had 1309 on my computer, so I thank you everybody, and if also for those that are behind the scene, both your colleagues, Dr. Suleri and Dr. Sajid, also my colleagues, Ms. Rabia Razak, and the team who have been working out here. Thanks to everybody.
Thank you very much for joining, and hope to see you in this virtual space over next 3 days. As I said, that there are 2 more panels on social protection. Please visit the complete agenda for the conference on our webpage, sdpi.org, and you can register for any session and you can hop on, hop off. It is a very flawless and smooth system, and thanks for making it a success. Thank you, all of you. Bye.
Thank you very much.